My sister went cave exploring. She returned with an awful request. I never understood her hobby. Why on earth would you want to let yourself be swallowed by the depths of the earth when you could? I don't know, breathe fresh air, see the sky, be able to move, to walk. The Nutty Putty Cave incident was one of the many stories that had stuck with me, and I hated knowing she was somewhere out there, practically buried alive, exploring some godforsaken tunnel. I hated knowing that any time I saw her could be the last. I'd begged her to pick some other hobby that wasn't so risky. She refused. She'd always talked so passionately about the thrill of it. "When you're down there, Jude," she'd start. And I didn't know whether to envy her courage or despise her carelessness. "When you're down there, you move differently. You think differently. You're not you anymore, but someone more agile and quiet. Your skin glides smoothly through the rocks, through the guts of the mountains. It's something ancient and full of life. Time just stops, and your heartbeat adjusts to the water dripping from the walls. Your eyes widen and embrace the darkness. And nothing compares to the first breath of fresh air once you're out." Every time she'd try to convince me, I'd cut her off. It's horrifying. You're essentially getting eaten by the mountains, and hope they're kind enough to spit you out. All those tight spaces make my skin crawl. Imagine not being able to take a deep breath because some wall is pressing down on your back. I'd die. Last month, she wouldn't shut up about this new cave system she'd discovered somewhere in the north. A 5-hour drive, she said. "I can't believe I never knew about this." It was so close to us all this time. My stomach dropped at the thought of her going on one of those adventures again. You know, there are better ways to spend your time. "Bullshit," she laughed. "Look, I'm safe. I'm not stupid. I wouldn't do it if I had any doubts that I would not return. You should come with me sometime." I was quick to refuse her, and she just smirked and shook her head. Whenever she set her mind on something, nothing could stop her. She sent me some texts, updates like 2 hours left, or the picture of the entrance of the cave. But then the updates stopped. I'd learned to let her do her thing and just wait until she contacted me. And over the years, I stopped feeling so anxious every time she would cut contact for a while. I knew she didn't have any signal down there. I knew to just wait. The last update she'd sent me was around 10 a.m. It was midnight now, and as I tried to fall asleep, something wouldn't let me. I kept seeing her when I closed my eyes, imagining her down there, swallowed by the rocks. I twisted and turned in my bed the same way she did, deep into the ground. My clothes were drenched in sweat, and I hoped she had just forgotten to update me and that she was out of the cave. At one point, my phone buzzed. I shot up and glared at the time. It was a little over 3 a.m. It was spectacular. I rubbed my eyes and felt the weight lift off my chest. Thank God. I typed some shallow response, then finally went to sleep. She came home the next day. At first, I didn't recognize her. Her cheekbones were more prominent, and she hadn't washed herself. She was drenched in mud and smelled of rot. Her eyes were full of life, darting from one place to another, and her hands would not sit still. She didn't speak much. I didn't know what it was, but I assumed something had happened down there that scared her enough to change her mind. I felt relieved. Maybe she'd had enough near-death experiences to finally quit. I stayed in my room that day, mostly working. I heard her walk around the house multiple times, looking through drawers and cabinets, slamming doors. At some point, she stopped and the hallway went silent. I was sitting at my desk, writing on my laptop. I could see the cracked door of my bedroom, leading to the dark hallway, and a fraction of one of our tall white lamps. I was focused on the screen, so everything else was blurry behind it, just some shapes and colors mixing together. It's not like I paid much attention to the background. Somewhere around 2 a.m. I called it a night. I glanced up at the hallway, and something caught my attention. The white, blurry shape of the lamp wasn't there anymore. Did she move it? I opened the door wider and peered into the hallway. The lamp was in its usual place, which had never been visible from my desk. My eyes stung a bit from the monitor, and I knew my vision was tired, but I could have sworn I'd seen something white and still through the cracked door. I even assumed it was the lamp because it had stood there for hours. Although, if I think about it, the lamp wasn't that tall. I don't even know what to think of that. But I have this knot in my throat as I'm typing this. It's so strange that most of the time, the human mind doesn't register peculiar things as peculiar and brushes them off as ordinary stuff. How many times had I seen something in the corner of my vision and just assumed it was some object, like a plant or a coat, when it wasn't? It made me realize how stupid we are as human beings. If someone wants to watch us, they can do it for as long as they please. And we won't know unless they want to. I turned my head to my sister's room. The door was shut. I wondered if she was sleeping. Carefully, I tiptoed to her door and gently twisted the doorknob. "Em," I whispered. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed in the dark, doing nothing. Were you watching me?" "Watching you?" "Yeah, I thought I saw—" She just stared at me. Then her gaze slipped to a fixed point behind me. She followed something with her eyes. I almost snapped my neck, turning to see what she was looking at. Nothing was there. "Em, are you okay? How was the cave system? Did you have fun? It's different down there." "Yeah, I know. It's dark and damp and tight." "No." Her voice was hoarse. She was studying her hands, turning them over again and again. "Look, I don't like what you're doing. This is just ridiculous. And I don't understand if you just want me to freak out. And this is one of those pranks. If you don't tell me what you saw, I'll just assume you're lying for attention. It's really tiring to be your sister sometimes." She widened her eyes, still fixated on her hands. I thought she was deliberately ignoring me for a while, until she started coughing. Her cough became clearer and more controlled, until I realized at some point she'd transitioned into a laugh that sounded painful. She grinned at me, but her eyes were blank. Then she mumbled something that sent chills down my spine. She'd spit out the words so fast that, for a good minute, I didn't realize what she'd said. We were both silent, just looking at each other. I didn't know how to respond, and was beginning to wonder if it was worth continuing the conversation. "You're tired. Go get some rest," I began, but I got interrupted. "You need to come with me, Jude." "Where?" "You need to come with me and crawl under the earth." My chest tightened and the corners of my vision went blurry. "Stop, Em." She just stared at me. Then her eyes shifted away, out the window at the end of the hallway. I frowned, but before I could turn around to look outside, she quickly stood up and blocked my view. She sprinted to the end and pulled the curtains. "Why did you do that?" "It's okay. Good night." She went into her bedroom, then shut the door behind her. I pulled back the curtains and stared into the darkness, looking for whatever the fuck she'd seen. The street was empty, apart from a car and a black trash can. Some bushes, my neighbor's house, a bike, the streetlights. I pulled the curtains back. As I stepped into my room, a thought lingered in the back of my mind. It all happened in a few seconds, but it was enough to weird me the fuck out. We only take the trash cans out on Tuesdays, when the garbage truck picks them up. It's Friday. I pulled back the curtains again, and the black trash can wasn't there anymore. Only I wasn't even sure that's what it had been. When you see something off, your mind automatically ties it to something rational, some explanation. If I think more about it, it could have been someone crouched over. I shook my head. "Stop. You're disturbed. Go to sleep." As I typed this out in bed, I just couldn't help thinking about what Em had said to me. The two sentences were on a loop in my mind, and they affected me because they weren't coming from a crazy person. And Em has never lied to me, so she really believed what she'd said. In her bedroom, when she'd flashed me her best grin, I discovered what happens after death. You won't make it there. I caught something on my trail cam. It's trying to pretend it's a cat. I set up the trail cams after something got into my chicken coop. It wasn't a fox or a coyote. They leave messes, bloody ones. Let me tell you, I've cleaned up more than a few of those over the years. This one? It was precise. The wire was clipped, the latch was open, and 4 of my best layers were gone without a trace. I live out here alone, so I had no one to back me up when I told the story, but I know what I saw. Or rather, what I didn't see. And I didn't see no damn coyote. "You sure about that?" Hayes asked down at the general store. "I know what a mess they make. Someone stole them." "Who's out here stealing your hens, Carrie?" "I don't know." I slapped my money down on the counter. "That's the point of the cameras. I'm going to see who took them." Hayes looked amused. "You think that chicken thieves are going to come back around a second time?" "Yes. And if they don't, just give me the damn cameras." And up they went. The first few nights, I caught the usual critters. Raccoons scuttling through the underbrush, a few deer passing through, even a bobcat slinking along the tree line. But they didn't clip the wire and cleanly steal my hens, so I left them be. It was 5 nights before something else came onto the screen. At first I thought it was a mountain lion. Big, sleek, moving low to the ground with purpose. It padded right through the frame of my western-facing cam at 2:47 a.m., but something about it was off. The legs were too long. The way the skin bunched around the joints looked unnatural, like it had extra folds it didn't know what to do with. And when it turned its head slightly, the eye was all wrong. Too round, too bright, like a human eye catching the light. I convinced myself I was seeing things. Low resolution, bad angle, maybe even a trick of the light. But I kept the cameras up. The next night, it came back. This time, I got a full body shot. The skin around its shoulders was peeling, like an old leather jacket stretched over something too big for it. I could see the wet sinew beneath, the way it glistened under the moon. The face was the worst part. It had the shape of a mountain lion, but the edges didn't sit right, as if it had been pulled too tight. And the mouth? The mouth turned to the camera, and it smiled. Then it was gone, vanished into the darkness. I had no proof for it, but I knew in my heart whatever I'd just caught on film was the culprit. That creature. It was the one that took my hens. Just my luck that it wasn't the local kids bored and looking for something to do. Just my luck it had to be, whatever that was. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the shotgun by my bed, every light in the house on. My closest neighbor is 6 miles out, and I wasn't about to call the sheriff over a mountain lion with a weird face. But I didn't shut my eyes once. It was just wrong feeling to do that. I work at a hotel, and I've been watching a man on the cameras run on the hotel gym's treadmill for hours. I work the graveyard shift at a small, usually mostly empty hotel just off the highway. The hours suck, obviously, but other than that, it's a pretty cushy job. I clock in, settle down in the back office, and watch downloaded movies or shows on my laptop. The connection sucks back there, but it's a place I can sit out of view of the guests and relax, so I just prepare accordingly. Periodically, I'll glance at the CCTV monitor hung on the wall in front of my desk. Mostly it's just to see if there's anyone at the front desk that needs anything, or to see when my coworkers arrive in the morning so I can brush the Cheeto dust off my shirt and pretend like I wasn't half asleep only moments before they arrived. The cameras show several other areas of the hotel too. Each stairwell, several shots of the parking lot outside and each exit door. The kitchen, laundry room, the lobby, and a few other areas. There's also a camera in the gym, but no one ever uses it. The hotel I work for isn't really known for their stellar cleanliness or functioning facilities. Our pool hasn't been open to guests in months, and our gym has like one functioning treadmill, a couple weights, and I think a pull-up bar. I've been working here for a few months, and I don't think I've ever been inside. Anyway, at about 2 a.m., 2 hours into my shift, I glance up from my show to check the cameras and notice that the light in the gym is on. The grainy footage shows a man, average-looking, maybe on the older and fatter side, running on the one working treadmill. I don't recall checking him in, but I'm not the one who usually handles that stuff. Most people are in before my shift anyway. Whatever, I thought. I can hardly judge him. Looks like he's doing more exercise than I ever do. I go back to my show, getting up once to grab another bag of chips from the concession area. When I get back, I check the time, 2:32 a.m., the one instance of actual work. I do starts at 3, when I run the nightly audit on the computers, so I have to start keeping track of the time more closely around then. I spare a glance towards the cameras, and I'm surprised to see that the man is still running on the treadmill. Well, probably not still, right? Like he probably took a break to do other workouts and now he's back to running. Or maybe he's been running this whole time. I don't know shit about exercise. In the crappy video quality, I could still see that he was sweating pretty hard. His shirt was almost an entire shade darker, and his thinning hair was visibly slicked back. At the time, all I thought was, good for him, I guess. Maybe this old fat guy should be motivating me to start working out for real. I finish another episode before getting up to start the audit process, which usually takes me a couple minutes. Before I left the office, I checked the cameras again, just because. I didn't like being surprised by a guest waiting for me at the desk whenever I went up. My eye immediately caught onto the treadmill guy, not just because he was still running, which was odd enough. I mean, it had been a full hour of, I'm pretty sure, non-stop running at a pretty quick pace for a guy like him. No, it's because this time he was staring straight at me. Well, not me, but the camera in the corner of the gym. I froze. We locked eyes, even though I obviously knew he couldn't see me. He was dead-eyed with a slack, exhausted expression on his face. And yet he was still running. His arms no longer swinging along with his run, but instead hanging limply at his sides. I stood there for a long few seconds, confused and creeped out by what I was seeing. Right before I decided to write this guy off as a weirdo and turn away from the monitor to go do my job, he fucking smiled at me, at the camera I mean. This creepy wide smile that didn't really reach his eyes. And the worst part was that his tongue just sort of limply flopped out of his mouth, as if the only thing holding it in was his closed lips. It just bounced around like he had no control over it, moving to the rhythm of his jog. It was also way too long, like a normal tongue would just stay in a person's mouth if it was completely relaxed, right? Needless to say, I was really creeped out by this guy. I don't know how long he was staring at the camera in the corner, or why he decided to smile right as I noticed him doing it. Obviously, it was just weird timing. Or he probably just decided to fuck with whoever might be watching the cams right at the moment that I looked up at him. But somewhere deep inside me, I felt like I was actually being watched. It was about to be 3 a.m., and if I didn't have the audit done by 3:15, I'd get another write-up and probably yelled at my boss about how it's literally the only thing I have to do all night. As anxious as this guy was making me feel, I didn't want to take my eyes off of him in case. I didn't even know why, honestly. However, I swallowed my nerves and tore my eyes away from the screen, and fast walked my way to the front desk, with my mind made up to do the audit as quickly as possible. Let me describe the layout real quick here. The back office is around the corner from the front desk. Down the hallway, past the elevators, the lobby where we do breakfast, the pool, and the laundry room is where the gym is. It's not the most well-designed hotel, and there's a few twists and turns leading to the gym at the other end of the first floor that makes directing guests verbally an annoying task. That also meant that as I stepped out to the front desk, I didn't have a straight shot to be able to see the gym. On the one hand, I was relieved that I was kind of far away from the weirdo, and on the other, I was made even more anxious that he was now no longer in my sights. I booted up the ancient computer and started printing reports, filing them away in various folders, with one hand and signing stuff that needed to be signed with the other. I'm sure I got some stuff wrong, but my priority was finishing this quickly so I could return to the office. I felt exposed out here. Couldn't see anything but the lobby. The sound of some pop radio playing way too loud, drowning out any other potential noise. Every second for the 10 minutes that I was out there, I felt like something really wrong was about to happen. I had to bring some of these reports back to the office to file them away while the audit process was running on the computers. Normally, I just did this at the end of the process to not make as many trips back and forth. And because as soon as the process ended, I had to update the system to roll over to the next day. If I didn't do that part within a minute of the process ending, the whole thing would get fucked up. This time, though, as soon as the computer started processing, I raced back to the office to check on the cameras again, if only just to confirm that he was still doing the same thing. The first thing I noticed when I got back was that the light in the gym had turned off. I hadn't heard the heavy gym door open and close from the front desk, but maybe the stereo was just too loud to hear it. I began scanning the rest of the displays, trying to find him on his way back to his room, in the stairwell or the elevators or wherever, just to give me some peace of mind. At first, I didn't see him anywhere on the cameras, until my eyes glanced back at the gym display. It was subtle, but the dim light on the treadmill display that indicated that it was in use looked like it was still on. I thought that maybe he just forgot to turn it off when he left, and then I saw him. He was still in there, still running. I just hadn't seen him at first in the dark. His body was barely lit by the treadmill, but that's not why I noticed him. His eyes were two pinpricks of light reflecting off the display, still staring directly at me. I choked back a gasp when I saw that. Why had the lights shut off while he was still in there? They were motion sensors. Maybe if he was standing perfectly still, they'd turn off eventually, but there he was, still running at the same pace. He was clearly exhausted, his whole body drooping forward as his arms swung back and forth, but his legs continued moving at the same speed as they were an hour ago when I first noticed him, and his head was craned at an unnatural angle to keep staring at me. In the back of my mind, I considered that maybe this man needed help, some sort of mental illness thing that made him keep running, but my fear kept me rooted to the spot, not breaking eye contact. I still had the audit process to complete, but there was no way I was taking my eyes off of him again. What the fuck? I muttered under my breath. But as the last word left my mouth, he suddenly stopped running and fell off of the treadmill, landing headfirst on the tile floor. The cameras didn't record sound, but I could swear I heard a crack. In my shock, it took way too long to react to the lights coming back on and him standing with his neck clearly broken and his head limply hanging backwards off of it. As soon as he stood, he ran out of the room, passing the laundry camera, the pool, and making it halfway through the lobby before I broke out of my paralysis to run and slam the door to the office shut, locking it in the process. A slam against the door shook the office 2 seconds after I had closed it, and then another, and another, like he was using his body as a battering ram. I looked back at the cameras, but there were none pointing directly at the back office's entrance. The only thing I could see was the trail he left of blood and what looked like shit all the way from the gym to the lobby. The entire room shook with the force of this fucking thing slamming itself against the door, and every call I tried to make to the police failed again and again. The door was heavy, but I didn't have faith in it holding up for that long if he kept going at this rate. I just kept looking back and forth between the door and the cameras, selfishly hoping that a guest would notice the commotion and draw this thing's attention away from me. I don't know what would happen to them if they did, but at the moment I was only focused on getting the fuck out of the hotel. After a few minutes, 3 to be exact, the banging stopped. It took a second for me to notice, but once I did, my eyes shot to the monitor. He was definitely still there, since there were no bloody footprints leading away from the back office. I wish I could forget just how long I stood there, staring at the screen and willing it to show this thing walk away. But the display on the bottom right of the monitor showed me each excruciating minute, which is how I knew exactly what time another guest started, making his way down to the lobby. At 6:28 a.m., I noticed movement on the camera that was pointing at the 3rd floor elevator. A young man dressed in workout clothes, carrying a gym towel. My heart sank, and I began to think of ways to warn him or somehow prevent this thing from doing whatever it was trying to do. I could have pulled the fire alarm. I could have grabbed a chair or something to use as a weapon and jumped out at it. Hell, I could have at least stopped watching. I didn't do any of those things. I watched as the man entered the elevator at the 3rd floor and descended down to the lobby. The second those elevator doors opened, the creature that had been standing in front of my office door for the past 3 hours and 18 minutes made its move. With a speed I could barely keep up with over several camera displays, its mangled body ran on perfectly functioning legs towards the guest, slamming into walls and leaving a bloody imprint on them as it went. The guest made it 1 foot off of the elevator before this thing tackled him back into it. I only saw a spray of blood hit the opposite wall as the elevator door slowly closed again. This was my chance to get the fuck out of the hotel and never look back, but again I found myself rooted to the ground in fear. I couldn't bring myself to tear my eyes away from the monitor, so I watched as the elevator door slowly opened once again. The guest walked out, just the same as he had walked in. He had the same chipper smile on his face, and I watched as he walked past the front desk, past the lobby, and the pool, and the laundry room, all the way to the gym. I was out the door, and on my way to never coming back again before I could see him enter. I'm writing this in my car a few miles away from the hotel because I couldn't stand to go home yet, but I figured I should make my version of events public just in case. I know that man is running on the treadmill right now, and my co-workers or whoever else comes into the hotel next is going to have to deal with what I went through all over again. But I can't bring myself to care. I even feel too claustrophobic to stay inside my car at this point after spending so long in the back office. My legs are still shaking, and the only thing I want to do right now is run as fast and as far away as I can. You're letting it get to you, Carrie, I exhaled. Acting just as bad as when you were drinking. Got yourself jumping at shadows. Nope. There was no chance I was tricking myself into relaxing. My eyes were still open when the dawn came. The night after that, the camera by my coupe caught it standing on 2 legs. It was blurry, sure, but the shape was unmistakable. It had the hind legs of a big cat, but its torso was wrong. Too long, too thin. The skin had sloughed off in places, leaving exposed ribs and raw muscle. The face, it wasn't a cat's anymore. Does that make sense? It still had the skull of a cat, the ears, the fur. But the fur was sort of slipping back like a hood, and the muzzle had been twisted up somehow, or bent down, or just car hit broken in a way that let the smile get wider. the mouth gaping open in a way no animals should. And the eyes, no doubt about it, human. It looked at the camera again, and then I watched as it took its hands and snapped the chicken wire with its bare hands. I ran out at dawn, yanked down every camera, and dumped them in the shed. I figured if I ignored it, it would go away. Childish? Sure. But what else could I do? Go out there and face it? Just the thought had me shaking in my boots, so I told myself I was seeing things, that I had been awake too long, looking for something that wasn't there. This morning I found the last remaining trail cam sitting on my front porch. I know I didn't put it there. I hadn't even looked at the footage yet. My hands shook as I clicked through the files. The final image was taken at 3:12 a.m. The creature was no longer walking through the woods. It was standing right in front of the camera, too close, its torn skin hanging in strips. Its mouth was open wide, its lips peeled back, revealing rows of jagged, uneven teeth. And its eyes, they were staring right into the lens, into me. Then in the last frame, it screamed. I don't remember throwing the camera. I don't remember running back inside. But I remember the sound. It wasn't caught on video, but I heard it. A high, keening wail, like metal tearing, like something forcing its way through flesh that was never meant to hold it. I haven't left the house since. I don't know what it wants, but I know one thing. It's watching me now. And hands that can snap wire can easily figure out how to open a flimsy wooden door.